and boom goes the dynamite.
Happy Monday. Happy new week of Daily Dive Talk. I'm your host, Renee Washington, and we are diving into all things around the NLL and lacrosse. We're recapping week 2. We've got a great guest on the show. Andy Towers, head coach of the 2021 PLL champions, Chaos, will be joining us as the coach of the year. Is going to be talking also about his work with lacrossedraws.com, as well as winning a title in the league. And then we've got to also look at and recap our picks, the stars that we're giving out today, and much more on Daily Dive. So without further ado, producer Mike Karvelis joining me, and let's look at how we did this week. Now, running through quickly a recap of week 2 action for anybody that may have missed it. We had Panther City knock off the Las Vegas Desert Dogs in their franchise inaugural game, the first of their program. And with a 6-2 run in the third quarter, the Panther City Lacrosse Club was able to hold them off by 2. Phil Caputo, Will Malcolm led the team with 6 points each. And we also saw 2021 first overall pick Jonathan Donville get 3 assists in his NLL debut. And then in the next game of the weekend, the Seals knocked off the Rush 13-12 in overtime. Whew! What a game that was. It was our game of the week. It lived up to the hype as Saskatchewan led 10-3 with a minute 42 left in the third quarter. And the Seals, with a comeback in overtime, win it. And with Frank Sciliano benched after some time, Chris Orogaleri, just 2 goals allowed, 10 saves, and a big relief play that he brought in to help them in that game. And then looking ahead at another surpriser, the Nighthawks knock off the Rock for the first time ever in franchise history, dating back to 2019. And we saw in that game, the Rock did not score for the final 22 minutes of play. Wild. So Connor Fields with 4 goals, 3 assists. Thomas Hogarth with 4 goals, led Rochester. Rylan Hartley, with a career high 50 saves in the game, including some stand on his head types of saves for that one there. And then also another team, as we're looking at Rochester 2-0 for the first time in franchise history, making some first. Well, in their first game, Calgary comes out with a win, and what a game that was. 23 penalties for Vancouver, 24 penalty minutes for Calgary, 23 penalty minutes for Vancouver. Huge difference. Definitely a physical game, but we saw in that Keegan Ball reaches 100 career goals. Jesse King led Calgary with 3 goals, 3 assists, and also spoke on the resilience of the team in that first game and just being able to win their opener in the way that they did. So, Mike, as we run through all the action that happened this weekend, got to also note our picks. I did pick the Rock to win. They, of course, did lose in that game against Rochester. So I was 3-1 on the weekend. You were 2-2, as you were surprised as the Rock and the Rush lost. So I'm curious to know, based off of all the action we saw this weekend, which surprised you most?
What surprised me most was Las Vegas's ability to hang with a team already. I know that they did end up losing the game, but I was expecting a beatdown. I'm sure a lot of people work at expansion franchises, as I mentioned on Friday, may not be the greatest, but they showed up and they showed out. So I was impressed with a very good dogfight, if you will, from an expansion franchise.
Yes, absolutely. And as per usual, Mike, we're on the same page. We always like to coordinate with our outfits, which, for the record, none of this is ever planned. Like, we were both rocking hoodies on Friday. Today, we're both rocking a nice black casual look. And we're on the same page with our thoughts around the games. I agree with you. I felt like, it's always interesting to see how a team rolls out the first. We just don't know what to expect. We've been watching on paper. We've been watching, through the expansion draft and seeing these pieces coming together. But to see them finally come together on the field, it's a totally different experience. So I was encouraged by the way that the Desert Dogs came into the league. Of course, they were hoping to start off their franchise with a victory and did not do so. But it was still a great game to watch. And you saw a lot of positives to take away from that. But also, which was your most disappointing, before we get into our Daily Dive 3 stars of the weekend, which was your biggest disappointment of the weekend?
I was not happy with the way the Vancouver Warriors played against the Calgary
Mm,
Roughnecks. I was very vocal on Twitter on Saturday night watching that game, wondering how many cheap shots Vancouver was going to get off in that game. And it showed by the penalty minutes. I know that people like a physical game. I know a lot of basketball fans like, oh, we like the tough grind of the 80s.
yeah.
I know that football fans like the old, rough and tough days. But in the end, this is a bunch of talented people. And like this one guy, like this Roughnecks player just scored a goal, gets shoved into the boards from behind. I mean, how does that stuff right there makes me mad. So I do wonder if that's going to tee off again the next game, I believe Friday night. But I
Mm.
didn't like seeing how over the top that game went for me personally. It overshadowed a lot of things for me this weekend.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I, as an athlete, loved a good physical game. I think it adds something in terms of intensity and for fans to be into it and for players to have that extra edge. I'm I prefer a physical game versus a pretty game. That's very clean cut and little to no fouls or anything. But there's a limit. There's absolute limit. And when you cross that line and it becomes dirty to the point that it's taking away from the talent, it's taking away from the rhythm and the momentum. You have constant whistles, you've got constant penalties. I mean, you look at all the penalty minutes alone, it just changes so much of the game. It's unnecessary. So I agree there needs to be a balance of having that physicality and that edge without it crossing that line and taking away from what we love about the game altogether. So that being said, as you talk about that Vancouver Calgary game, got to get into our daily dive 3 stars of the weekend because one of those players comes from that game. And as we mentioned earlier, passing that 100 career goal mark, and we've talked about him pretty regularly on the show, actually, from being listed in polls as underrated to somebody that's helped the Warriors out tremendously and did so again this weekend. So Keegan Ball, one of our daily dive 3 stars of the weekend, you get one for those 4 goals you scored, including that 100th career goal, although a loss to the Roughnecks. Big performance for Keegan Ball again. And then in net, we've got 2 goalies to honor. And as Frank Giuliano, went out, backup goalie Chris Orgleri, which whose name I possibly just messed up, steps in between the pipes, locks it down, helps the Seals in a comeback victory, and a big reason why they were able to knock off the Rush. And then also in net, Nighthawks goalie Rylan Hartley, as we mentioned, those career high 50 saves to hold off a talented Toronto Rock offense and give the Nighthawks their first ever franchise victory over Toronto. What an exciting weekend it was. And gosh, I wish we could spend hours and hours talking about it. But we've got to shift gears and talk about more excitement. Championships at that. As we are going to have our guest, head coach of the 2021 PLL champions, Chaos, here on Daily Dive coming soon. So don't go anywhere as Andy Towers will be joining the show in just a few moments. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Daily Dive. We've had a chance to recap the week 2 action across the NLL. We've had a chance to give out our 3 stars of the weekend. And now it's time to switch with our guest for the week. We've got Andy Towers. And just want to remind you guys to use SeatGeek Big Guest, the code WHR for $20 off your first order on SeatGeek. As we get ready to bring in our big guest, Andy Towers, head coach of the 2021 PLL champions, Chaos, the 2019 PLL coach of the year, founder of lacrossedraws.com. Andy, welcome. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. May not have Andy yet. Andy's making an entrance. Andy, can you hear us? Seems like we have a moment here to just remind you, as I was just sharing, that code WHR for $20 off your first order on SeatGeek, as we are getting into our guest segment, SeatGeek Big Guest. So not quite sure what's happening there with Andy. I know producer Mike is working hard behind the scenes to bring him on. And so I also want to take this moment, since I didn't share in the beginning, to remind you to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, follow the show, like us, keep up to date with all things Daily Dive at Daily Dive Lax on social media, and subscribe on YouTube. So Andy, are you in the building? Can you hear us? Okay, maybe, I'm not sure if he's muted or having tech issues, but we'll keep working at that. So while you're hitting that subscribe button, of course, you can also check out our merch. We've got tons of great things that we're dropping, hoodies and beanies. It is hoodie season. And so you can check those out. The link in our bio at Daily Dive Lax does give you access to be able to check out our merchandise, where you can follow us, where you can check us out. And then if you haven't had a chance, drop those comments. Bring those questions, bring the comments into the chat. We'll bring you into the show as well, as we're talking through here on Daily Dive, and have you be a part of the conversation. You are not just a viewer, you can be involved as well. And so that being said, let's try one more time to see if we can get Andy Towers here on the show. I know I don't see you, but hopefully I can at least hear you. How are you, Andy? All right, we'll circle back. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with hopefully Andy. Andy can hear us, but we cannot hear Andy. So we're working on it. We'll be right back after this quick break with more from Andy Towers on the show.
And boom goes. And boom goes the dynamite.
Welcome back to Daily Dive. I'm your host, Renee Washington, and we've had a chance to talk through our Week 2 recaps, surprises, disappointments, and also one thing that's disappointing right now is technology not being kind to us. So we have Andy Towers trying to get in here. Andy, I'm hoping I can at least hear you, if not see you. Are you able to, I know you said you can hear us, but are you there? Very odd. Okay, well, not quite sure what's happening there with Andy, but we will have to see about circling back to get Andy on again in the future. I know we tried. Technology is not always our friend. So, Andy, sorry about that. We'll have to bring you back on another time, buddy. And wanted to definitely get Andy's thoughts on a PLL title and his work that he's doing. So, we'll have to circle back to bring him back on and discuss more in the future. But Mike, I want to get into a little bit around our rankings and our picks because one of us did a little bit better than the other. Not much, but a little bit better. It was 3-1 on the weekend. And so overall, our rankings after week 2. Now, for those of you that missed last week's episode as we were breaking down our week 1 rankings, after each week's series of games, we're giving you our top 5 teams at that moment, based on how they're playing, based on what we're thinking, based on what we've seen. So take with a grain of salt and drop those picks and your rankings into the chat as well so you can join the conversation around our top 5. So for me, I'm going to, you know what? No, I'm going to let you go first. You were 2-2 on the week. Give us your top 5 with your number 5 option first.
I want to first give a shout out to Andy Towers. I know that would have been a great conversation, but number 1 for me, I'll go 5-1 again. Number 5 for me, they were not ranked last week for me. The Rochester Nighthawks have entered the conversation, knocking out the Toronto Rock. I think the Nighthawks have had 2 really good games where I don't like they haven't scored each time for like 15 or 20 minutes, but the other team hasn't scored either. It'd either be the Swarm or the Toronto Rock. And I believe the Rock have a little bit better offense, and they were just they shut them down for the last 22 minutes. Number 4 for me, jumping up to number 4 is the Colorado Mammoth. They got the benefit of not playing this week. Shout out to the Mammoth. Number 3 and number 2, number 1 are the same. Seals at 1, Rush at 2, Bandits at 3. You're wondering, well, the Rush lost. Yes, but they punched the Seals in the mouth early. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. As much as we praised the Rush in the first game, they punched them early, and they couldn't hold on late. But we'll see how they do in the next game. I believe is actually December the 31st, something like that. So I've got Rush whole pack at number 2, but Seals at number 1 for me.
Bringing the Nighthawks into the conversation with that 2-0 start. I agree. I could see these rankings. It's not far off from my own. So I did not change anything, actually. I still have the Riptide at number 5. If you guys remember, I had to pick a top 6, and the Rock were at number 6. So maybe number 6 changes. I think I would move the Nighthawks into that number 6 spot as the honorable mention for my top 5. But my number 5 is still the Riptide. For me, I don't want to over analyze one game. And so I'm gonna look at this in like 2s and 3s, like rhythm, momentum, consistency. There's some other factors. So I didn't change anything. I didn't shake anything up. I actually didn't even do that on purpose, though. I legitimately wrote out my 5, and then I looked back and was like, oh, it's the exact same as last week. So number 5, still the Riptide. Number 4, the Mammoth. Again, not playing this week for these teams. There's nothing for me to move them. I didn't see enough from the other teams to move them into that top 5. The Rush at 3, Buffalo Bandits at 2, and still sitting at number 1, despite having a slow start, the San Diego Seals. And I just feel as though looking across these 5 teams, they've given me the most in these early weeks of like talent, comebacks. You've seen some top players and top performances. And when you're talking about top teams, sometimes the difference is having that playmaker that in the biggest stretches can step up and make something happen. The consistency. So I'm going to lean towards having the same 5, but I think that when we come back, and we're moving forward into the month and definitely into the season, I imagine some of these teams are going to be changing. So
Yeah, there's a lot of games this weekend. I was like, oh, this is
yeah.
fantastic. Some double headers. We get the Panther City and Las Vegas again. We get the Vancouver. I don't even know what to call them right now. The Vancouver Warriors, we'll say for now until I think of a nickname for them. And the Calgary Roughnecks. And then I just I like your Riptide pick at number 5 because I feel like you're right. Like having a Jeff Teat kind of guy is nice. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that the Rush at number 2 don't have. Hello. Something that the Rush don't have at number 2 for me. But I like the Riptide pick at number 5. I think that's a nice one. I just kind of went with Rylan Hartley's defense
Oh yeah.
first couple of weeks, but I could see
Yeah.
the Riptide at number 5.
I think there's always a team across sports, not even just in the NLL, across sports, that is that young team that's right there. Now, I think about like the Bengals last year in the NFL. You look across teams and it's like you've got a young Joe Burrows that's leading them, Jamar Chase. I think the Riptide have that with Jeff Teat. I'm not saying he's the Joe Burrows of the league, but who knows? He could be. But Jeff Teat being the guy that is young obviously has grabbed the attention of many as he's in the top rankings for across NLL players. But I think when you have one of the best in the league, you can't count that team out. When it comes down to it and you're in crunch time, he's going to be able to lift the Riptide. And also he's going to be able to get the guys around him playing better. So with that youth, although he may not have the same type of veteran experience and the physicality and things that come with the years of maturity, he's going to have that like raw, organic, let's just go out and play type of mentality with the talent that I think is going to get the Riptide playing at a higher level than many may have expected. So on paper, probably not a top 5 team, but I think they're going to have that underdog mentality of like, we're coming in to show that we are one of the top teams in the league. We weren't there last year, but we're here this year. Pay attention.
I've been hearing the word streaky a lot. I wanted to shift gears a little bit here. I've heard like Alex Bouquet, the Rush goalie, is streaky. And I've heard that other goalies are too. It seems like it's been tossed around, like a word that I've seen tossed around. If you're a Rush fan right now, because we know there's a lot of them out there, I want to know, like from a player's perspective, because you played sports before, I have not. How do you feel like when you punch a team in the mouth and then you lose the game and you should have won? Does it make you feel good that you punched the better team in the mouth, or does it make you feel like crap at the end because it's recent on your mind?
It definitely hurts whenever you blow a lead, no matter what that lead is. That's frustrating when you're in the driver's seat and you're not able to maintain that. But I think you would rather have those losses this early in the season. Like for a week 2 loss to be up against a team, as you talk about the Seals being a favorite, and you're up on them in a big way, and you blow that lead. Although it's very frustrating, it does give your team a lot to take away from it. So I think it's one of those things in the short term. You're like, oh, we blew it. We wish we could get that one back. That's a winnable game. And it absolutely is. But I think bigger picture, especially as a coach, that's where you rein it in and you remind them, hey, you know what? This is a game. It went to overtime. We were up by 7 at one point. We were able to do it. There's a lot of positives, a lot of teachable learning moments through that. So now it's a matter of, okay, if we can take that lead, let's work on closing it out. Let's work on making sure that whoever's between the pipes, whether it's Frank Giuliano or Chris, whoever's between the pipes, whoever's on the field, whoever we're facing, we're going to bring the same consistency from start to finish. So that's why if I'm the Rush, I would be encouraged by it. I'd be frustrated, don't get me wrong, because I never like to lose. But I would definitely be encouraged by some of the positives you can take away from how their attack looked, how they were able to hold the Seals to low goals so for long stretches. There's a lot you can definitely take away from. And it makes you wonder, does it prove that they were contenders? After 2 weeks, is this a team that's a serious contender for an NLL title, Mike? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I do believe so. And I want to mention that Dilks, forgot his first name, but Dilks, the captain for the Rush, went out early in that game. And I
Right.
wonder, like, if he would have provided some spark. There was also another player, a key player that went out as well. I don't know how long those injuries are. I haven't really seen a report yet. But I do wonder, like, I would feel good right now if I'm the Rush. Like, I feel like you just want to cuss at first, but then, like, afterwards, you're like, hey, Nah, think about it, we weren't too bad in that game. Like you said, it went to overtime. It's not like we just blew it full swing. But we ended up scoring a couple more goals to push overtime. And of course, the better team took over. But I don't know, man. A lot of what ifs, but a lot of we can be betters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely a lot of frustration that comes through that, but there's positives that you can take from it. And that's what you have to really focus on and make sure that you're not overthinking it. It is only week 2. So I know we are on our end always over analyzing and breaking things down. That's our role as the analysts behind this. So just wanted to remind everybody, as always, be sure to keep up with all we've got going on here on Daily Dive. We're bringing you conversations, we're giving updates, we're recapping games, we're previewing games and giving our picks. And you can absolutely join the conversation in the chat, in the comments. You can subscribe, you can follow, and check us out at Daily Dive Lax on social media and Daily Dive across everything else. And one last plug, if you haven't already, to check out our merch and see all the things that we are selling within our store on our link through our link tree that you can check out. And the link for that is always in our social media bio. So again, our apologies to Andy Towers. We will have to get the 2021 PLL champ and 2019 coach of the year back on the show to see if we can get into some excitement around the PLL and much more. And for all of you, thank you for joining us here on Daily Dive. For my producer, Mike, I'm Renee Washington saying have a great rest of your Monday, and we'll see you back here for more on Daily Dive tomorrow, because we're here Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, bringing you live NLL and lacrosse talk on Daily Dive.